The Murder Scene podcast is a show that may contain graphic descriptions of violent acts, including those of a sexual nature and bad language. If you feel you may be adversely affected by such content, please do not listen. Listener discretion is advised. Not intended for children.
Hello and welcome to The Murder Scene, a podcast where we delve into the darker side of human nature to explore murders, missing persons, cold cases, serial killers, and all manner of strange, mysterious happenings that fall into the case file marked true crime. I'm your host, Alex. So, hop into the back of my creepy white van filled with grey tarps and duct tape and let's go! The Murder Scene Podcast, Episode 2, The Piggy Palace Good Times Society, The Life and Crimes of Robert Pickton, the Pig Farmer Killer. Robert William Pickton, Canada's most prolific serial killer, was only convicted on 6 charges of second-degree murder. Initially, he was charged with 26 murders. He confessed to killing 49 women, lamenting that he didn't make it to a nice round 50 victims. Willie Pickton was born on the 24th of October, 1949, in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Pickton probably began his murder career in the 80s or 90s, after both his parents were dead, and he and his siblings, a younger brother, David, and an older sister, Linda Louise, inherited the family pig farm. As youngsters, he and David were forced to work as unpaid labour on the pig farm. Linda Louise did not live there with the rest of her family. Ma and Pa Pickton felt that their surroundings and the nature of their business was not an appropriate setting to raise a young lady. She was sent to live with relatives in the nearby city of Vancouver. The Pickton parents were tyrants. The farm, and the pigs themselves, were much more important to them than their sons. The pigs took priority over everything else. Even the boys' personal hygiene was of no consequence to them. They didn't care that Willie and David were bullied viciously in school for wearing filthy clothes that reeked of the pig shit they were made to shovel before school. They shared a most unflattering nickname. All the kids called them Stinky Piggy. But regardless of her neglect and coldness toward him, Willie Pickton was somehow still a mama's boy. Neither Willie nor David spent much time with their father outside of their farm chores. If they did interact with him, it was usually in the context of some form of abuse. When he was 12 years old, he raised a calf that he grew to love and kept it as a pet. He adored it. One day, after getting home from school, he walked around the farm looking for his buddy. He searched all over the property. Somebody told him to check the barn. When he got there, his beloved wee calf had been slaughtered, gutted and hung up on a meat hook. His heart was broken. After dropping out of school in 1963, he worked in a butcher's for almost 7 years as a meat cutter. But after his all-too-brief respite from the controlling, abusive parents, Willie had to leave his job. He'd been summoned to return to the pig farm to work again. In 1978 and 1979, his father and mother both died, leaving all their worldly possessions to the 3 siblings. In 1997, Pickton and a sex worker named Wendy Eistetter got into a heated argument in his trailer home. Pickton tried to kill her, stabbing her multiple times, but she fought him like a wild animal, managing to knock the knife out of his hand, grabbed it and started stabbing him with his own wannabe murder weapon. But because Wendy had a history of addiction and prostitution, the police declared that she would be an unreliable witness in court, and that her testimony was unlikely to result in a conviction. They let that fucker go on a $200 bond for attempted murder. They stayed the charges. That means they pretty much went away permanently. They were not in the least bit interested in justice, not for a drug-addicted sex worker. Her life just wasn't all that important to them, apparently. This arrogant, haughty attitude that the entire judicial system almost everywhere has towards sex workers and the addicted is one of the reasons serial killers target them. Not only are they easy prey, but when they turn up dead or go missing, few people care and not many notice. If you take Willie Pickton as an example, this man was not some psycho genius. He failed the 2nd grade twice, for fuck's sake, and the 3rd grade once. He managed to clock up 49 victims. 49 victims. So many rumors about Pickton persisted for years. They literally had a near-murder victim who fought him and escaped. They just didn't care. They let him go free. In 1992, his brother, David, was fined $1,000 and given 30 days probation for sexual assault. But when you disobey their administrative regulations, it's a different story. Port Coquitlam officials sued the Picktons for zoning and ordinance violations. They had all but abandoned the agriculture that they were zoned for and renovated one of the farm buildings to act as a venue to hold concerts, dances, and other events. Done with farming, they decided they wanted to run an events venue for hire and filed a non-profit organisation. They renamed the farm the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. Catchy. The paperwork outlined their intent to, quote, organise, coordinate, manage and operate special events, functions, dances, shows and exhibitions on behalf of service organisations, sports organisations and other worthy groups. The events venue was a refurbished slaughterhouse on the farm, located at 953 Dominion Avenue, Port Coquitlam, where they hosted all manner of raves and wild parties that were serviced by Vancouver sex workers. Some nights they had 2,000 guests, among them members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang. They were regular attendees at the farm's functions and festivities. The constant flouting of the zoning ordinances came to a head after they hosted a New Year's Eve party in 1998. Local courts slapped an injunction on the Pickton brothers, banning them from holding any further events at the farm. The police had granted authorization to remove and arrest anybody attending any event on the farm in the future. The Piggy Palace Good Times Society failed to produce their financial statements the next year, and their non-profit status was removed soon after. Shortly after that, the charity was dissolved. In 2002, a search warrant to look for illegal firearms on the Pickton pig farm was granted after an eyewitness went to police. The brothers were arrested. What the police discovered on the farm that day enabled them to obtain a further, more expansive warrant as part of the British Columbia missing women investigation. They had found several items that belonged to missing women from the local Vancouver area. The brothers were both released and Robert was charged with weapons offences, but the police couldn't ignore what they now knew for sure was going on at the pig farm. They put Willie under surveillance. On the 22nd of February 2002, Pickton was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Serena Abbotsway and Mona Wilson, Many more charges would follow. In the end, Willie Pickton faced 27 charges of first-degree murder. The excavations of the land went on with heavy equipment and soil-sifting machinery, looking for fragments of human remains as if they were placer gold. In 2004, the Provincial Health Authority made a statement and issued a warning to the Canadian public that was straight out of a horror movie. Pickton sold homemade pork sausage from the farm. Can you guess where this is going? The warning said that Willie may have ground up the bodies of his victims and mixed it into the sausage meat. He's also suspected of feeding victims to his pigs. Most of the buildings on the Pickton farm have been demolished and the entire property fenced off. There's a lien on it by the Canadian Crown. During the raid on the farm following the horrifying ordeal Wendy suffered, police took a pair of boots and some articles of clothing that belonged to Willie Pickton. The boots sat in an RCMP locker for several years. In 2004, the boots underwent forensic testing, which revealed the DNA of 2 women, neither of which was Wendy. It turned out to be the DNA of Willie's victims Andrea Faye Borhaven and Cara Louise Ellis. On the 30th of January 2006, Pickton's trial started with him entering a not guilty plea on the 27 charges of first-degree murder. One of the charges was thrown out by Justice James Williams for lack of evidence. He then split the charges into 2 separate groups, a group of 6 counts and another group of 20 counts. On the 4th of August 2010, the latter group of 20 charges were stayed. Although the decision was not published, and therefore the public at large were not able to access it, the judge made a public statement regarding the splitting and staying of the charges. He said that to have a trial with all 26 charges at one time in the same trial would have placed a massive burden on the members of the jury. Such a trial would be enormous, could even last for years. It would also raise the risk of Pickton's legal team calling for a mistrial. During the trial, staff from the lab testified that they had found approximately 80 DNA profiles of unidentified persons. Half were male, half were female. The interior of Pickton's trailer home was like Buffalo Bill's murder basement. Police found boxes of ammo for a .357 Magnum handgun, night vision goggles, furry handcuffs, a syringe filled with a bright blue liquid, a bottle of Spanish fly aphrodisiac, and a loaded .22 revolver, which had 1 round fired and a rubber dildo inserted over the barrel. Pickton later explained that this acted as a silencer. Yeah. Andrew Bellwood, a former employee and resident at the farm who spent a lot of time hanging out there with Willie, claimed he confessed to him that he murdered prostitutes. He strangled them, processed them like they were slaughtered cattle, bled them dry, gutted them, and fed them to the pigs, as if their remains were buckets of slops. Another witness, a friend of Pickton, said Willie told him he had a good way to kill a female heroin addict, by injecting them with windshield washer fluid. I assume that's the blue liquid in the hypodermic syringes. How many victims were murdered using this little trick? And what about the 40 male DNA profiles that were found? Who the fuck were they? He was never charged with the murders of any men. I've never even heard any other mention of men. Were they victims? Or were they men who shared his psychotic pastime with? A photograph was shown in court as evidence. It depicted items found in a trash can in the slaughterhouse on the farm. It contained the partial remains of his victim, Mona Wilson. The surprising verdict given by the jury on the 9th of December 2007 was not guilty on all 6 counts of first-degree murder, but guilty on all 6 counts of second-degree murder. At some point in the trial, the judge had to explain the jury's logic regarding the switch from first-degree murder charges to second-degree murder charges. Apparently, the jury believed that none of the murders were pre-planned, and so they decreased the degree to second. I shit you not, they actually said that. Aye, Pickton accidentally murdered 49 people. Just spontaneously decided to murder people 49 times. Yeah. Supreme Court Justice James Williams sentenced Pickton to the maximum detention period for second-degree murder. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years. It was an identical term to what he would have been sentenced to had the charges remained first-degree murder. The judge stated during sentencing, quote, "Mr. Pickton's conduct was murderous and repeatedly so. I cannot know the details, but I know this. What happened to them was senseless and despicable." Pickton was convicted on all 6 of the second-degree charges for the brutal killings of the following women. Serena Abbotsway, 29. Mona Lee Wilson, 26. Andrea Josbury, 22. Brenda Ann Wolfe, 32. Georgina Faith Papin, 34. Marnie Lee Ann Frey, 24. He was also accused of the murders of the following 21 women. Jacqueline Michelle McDonnell, 22. Diane Rosemary Rock, 34. Heather Kathleen Bottomley, 27. Jennifer Lynn Firminger, 28. Helen May Hallmark, 20. Patricia Rose Johnson, 25. Heather Gabrielle Chinook, 30. Tanya Hollick, 23. Sherry Lee Irving, 24. Inga Monique Hall, 46. Tiffany Louise Drew, 27. Sarah Jean DeVries, 29. Cynthia Cindy Felix, 43. Angela Rebecca Jardine, 27. Diana Melnick, 23. Jane Doe, age unknown. Deborah Lynn Jones, 42. Wendy Crawford, 43. Kerry Lynn Koski, 38. Andrea Faye Borehaven, 25. And Cara Louise Ellis, 25. All of the charges for this group of 21 murdered women were stayed by the judge on the 4th of August, 2010. These women will never have justice. Some of the people who came and went at the farm in those days talked disparagingly about many of the other visitors. Andy Bellwood lived and worked at the farm for a short while. Once word got around that poor, simple, gullible Willie had tons of money from lucrative real estate deals, hangers-on came out of the woodwork and out from under every rock. Bellwood describes himself, at that time, as one of these people. There were so many homeless people, both men and women, people who needed a place to stay, needed money, drugs. Everybody wanted something from Willie. Bellwood also describes a disturbing incident that happened between him and Willie Pickton. He was in his room watching TV when Pickton entered and asked him if he wanted to go get a hooker for the night. Bellwood wasn't interested, but Willie wasn't dissuaded. He asked Bellwood, "You know what I do with hookers?" Pickton reached under the mattress on Bellwood's bed. He took out a belt, a length of wire, and a pair of handcuffs. Pickton then acted out a bizarre, creepy pantomime for Bellwood. He simulated climbing on top of a woman on the bed, restraining her with the handcuffs, then strangling her with the belt. Lynn Ellingson, a local woman who was friends with Pickton, lived at Willie's property for a while. She'd do various jobs around the place and clean up in Willie's trailer home for him. One day he asked her to take a ride with him to the downtown east side of Vancouver, a seedy, run-down, drug-ridden area of the city where all the prostitutes, pimps, and pushers hung around. Willie wanted to pick up a woman for the night. He was smart enough to know that the presence of another female in his stinking truck would put the sex worker more at ease in the presence of a creepy-looking bastard like Pickton. Him, his truck, his farm, just all scream, "Serial killer!" Once they found a prostitute, they took her back to the farm, to Willie's trailer. He took her to his bedroom, and Ellingson retreated to her own room, where she got high on crack. At some point, Ellingson had the strange notion that she should go look for Willie. He was nowhere to be found in the trailer. Neither was the woman they picked up. She noticed as she looked out the window of the trailer and across the farmyard, there was a light glowing in the barn. She headed over there. What she saw changed her life forever. Willie's companion for the night was hanging from chains suspended from the ceiling. A blood-soaked Pickton was skinning her. Lynn was paralyzed with fear, unable to tear herself away and run like she wanted to, unable to flee from the abject horror that was burning the image into her psyche, indelible, permanent. Willie whispered in her ear. She'd better not breathe a single word about what she just saw, or she'd be right up there hanging from a meat hook next to Georgina Poppin. So she didn't. She kept her mouth shut, kept it to herself. And she used Pickton's dark secret against him, blackmailing him several times for cash to feed her ever-increasing drug addiction. Lisa Yelds, a local woman with a colourful past, was a friend of Willie Pickton's. She talks scathingly about the hangers-on at the farm, who all knew that Willie was gullible and prone to buying a good sob story. He would hand out thousands of dollars in cash to these people. It's entirely possible that some of the cash Willie doled out was hush money to buy the silence of people who hung around the pig farm and perhaps saw things that they should not have seen, things they more than likely wished they had not seen. It's also possible that a few of them may have been accomplices, accessories in Willie's crimes, people who might have helped clean up his murder scenes, aided him in disposing of bodies. Being a serial killer, by definition, is usually a solitary existence. After the trial, Pickton went on to make numerous appeals on various points of law, angling for a mistrial or having his sentence overturned. The legal team claimed that the judge had erred in his instructions to the jurors. The appeal was denied. The Supreme Court decided that none of the points of concern of the defense would have made any difference to the outcome of the trial, nor would it have affected the verdict of the jury. A public inquiry was long called for by the friends and families of downtown East Side's missing women. As a result of the inquiry, the Missing Women Inquiry was extended to include the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. On the 19th of May 2024, Pickton was violently attacked by another inmate in the prison. It is alleged that the suspected attacker is a violent armed robber with a history of assaults on his fellow inmates. Martin Charest allegedly took a broken broom handle and plunged it into Pickton's head, spearing him like an unsuspecting fish. He was airlifted to a hospital in Quebec City, where he died from complications from the attack on the 31st of May, 2024.
Thanks for listening. Go to themurderscenepodcast.com or at the Murder Scene Podcast on YouTube for all our social media links.